So I normally do off-road racing, and just about every single video on this channel has been related to either a vintage or modern off-road builds and projects and all that stuff. But my local track, my home track, RCHR, for the past couple of years, they've been doing on-road racing outside. Basically, after the indoor track switched from dirt to AstroTurf, and then in the summer and the outdoor season, they used to do off-road dirt racing in a section to the side of the track outside. They stopped renting out that area for a variety of reasons, and they basically, in the summer, temporarily each day, they'll turn the back parking lot into an on-road racetrack. And they've had a pretty good amount of success with this. One of the classes that they run there is Silver Can touring car. And there are different rules for it, which have changed this year, and I'll get into that in a minute. But at least last year, basically, it was like a run what you brung class. So whatever you have, you just throw a Silver Can, a Tamiya torque-tuned motor in there, and you use specific tires that they sell at the track, and off you go. I think you had to have also, there were limitations on the body, so this is clearly a Dodge Viper. It had to be like a production car body, so that way you weren't using some weird-looking prototype body that has a lot of specific aerodynamic features. So if the car is, mass-produced, you can put that body on the chassis. What I wanted to do last year was to run a Yokomo YR4, because I have a lot of Yokomo stuff, a lot of YZ10s, and I have, as a consequence of collecting YZ10s over time, I do end up with occasionally YR4 parts, or at least 870C parts that can translate over to the YR4. So I figured it would just make sense to get one and run it. This here is a YR4-M2, although the upper deck, I think, is from a traditional YR4, but everything from the chassis, suspension, everything else is YR4-M2, I believe. And then this here is another one that I got. This is the M2 Type J. Completely different. I'll get into this in a minute. But in any case, I wanted to run this, and I wanted to make it all nice and beautiful. So I, actually when I got it, it was very clean already. But I wanted to do a few other things to it, like add front sway bar and a rear sway bar. And I think this brace here, this is from a 93 Works. I can't quite remember if this came with the chassis or not, but this helps to brace the steering rack, keep it from wobbling too much. So when you build up all of these components on the YR4 for the suspension, the steering and everything, it actually becomes pretty tightly packed. So if you want to actually get to the diffs, it's not nearly as simple as if you were working on an 870C or a Works YZ10, which doesn't have so much clutter. So it does make it a little harder to service, but it looks awesome. So basically the YR4-M2 has these really tiny shocks. And what I found last year when I was putting this together is that the cap here screws onto a thread, an aluminum thread that comes off of this shock, the top of the shock body here. And I don't think it's an M3, it might be like an M2.6 or something, but this can strip very easily. And I happen to do that on one of these. But if you can recover that by filling that stripped hole with JB weld, and then you screw this back on, you let it cure, it's perfectly fine. Okay, tiny shocks, lightweight, which is also good for Silver Can. You want the car to be light. Belt drive, very efficient. Yokomo belt drives are known for their efficiency. Same tiny shocks in the rear. I did have to play a few games, I think, with the mounting here to make sure the shocks are straight against the tower. I'm not quite sure why I did that. Maybe it was related to the sway bar that I put in the rear, because this particular sway bar, I think, was for the YZ10. But the YR4-M2 sway bar might be a slightly different shape, but as you can see, this protrudes out, and so you don't want the shock to bang into that, so you have to push the shock rearward for clearance. Okay, fine, fair enough. The diffs in this are the 33 tooth diff, so or diff pulleys. So those were the same that you would use in the 94 and 95 YZ10. So another reason to get a couple of these is to stock up on some spare diffs for the YZ10 in case I need them. Like I can tear this one apart. I think I have another one in here. There's another M2 Type J with 33 tooth diffs in it. So I plan on one day disassembling that. So I only got to run this once last summer, and I didn't really get a chance to make any running videos of it. So I've had this thing for over a year, and I haven't really had a chance to put any content of it onto my YouTube channel. So I apologize for that. I just haven't really been able to do much. But what I can say is, in the one time that I did run it, it was really good. You know, with the sway bars and the teeny tiny shocks and everything, there's not that much tunability for the shock positions, but at least for this chassis, the way it's set up, the Silvercan motor, you don't need it. It runs really nice. The only thing I had to do was with the inner rear camera link mounting point. That was the main weakness, because this tower, the stock tower, has one mounting point there, and it puts this link up kind of high. So the rear was rolling a lot. Even with the sway bar, I was getting a lot of rolling in the rear. Maybe I could get stiffer springs or put thicker oil in the shocks, but I don't have any other springs for this. So I figured what I would do is manually drill, I don't know if you can see it here, a lower hole. So this hole here is where this link used to go. Huge difference, right? It was way the hell up here. So very very low rear roll center. It would make it roll a lot. I don't know why they did it that way. So I moved it down as far as I could without it actually touching the rear bulkhead. Kind of hard to see, but there's, on the bulkhead here, you have this little ear that comes out that the shock tower mounts onto, right? This, let me get this over here. This guy right here. And this has a certain height to it, and this is going to limit how far down you can push this camera link mounting point, which is going to limit your roll center tuning. And again, the shock tower only came with one hole, right? So there was really no tunability whatsoever. I had to drill this hole manually on both sides. And because I did it by hand, I didn't get it perfect. As you can see, this one is a little further out than this hole. So the left side is going to have more camber gain than the right side. You know, not perfect, but the camber gain to me was less important than getting that roll, the roll center up, which means pushing that camber link down. And okay, this is off by a few millimeters. I'll take it. I haven't actually had a chance to test this with that setup change. So I hope to bring this to RCHR this summer when they do outdoor racing, and to at least get a little bit of track time to see how it compares. The thing is, though, they've changed the rules for the Silvercan class this year so that this chassis is actually no longer legal. Because it's a belt drive chassis, what they want to see are shaft drive composite molded chassis. So I'll get to what my solution for that is in a moment, but I figured I'd at least give you guys a little overview here of what I did with this YR4-M2. I think it's a beautiful car, mostly because I already got it in pretty good condition. And the M2 Type J is quite different. It has the center shock absorber like I talked about a couple of times on the 97 YZ10. I think there's another version of the YR4 that has this as well. The motor mount is also quite different. You see, the motor mount has an upper hole and a lower hole, depending on, I guess, what you want to do with the battery mounting and the center of gravity. So if you're going to mount your battery laterally across the chassis, you have to lift the center lay shaft up so the belt can go up and over the battery. And then you have a roller here that helps it go over, okay? And then if you run like saddle packs or maybe a shorty pack on one side, you can drop this whole thing down for a lower center of gravity. That's pretty clever. Other things, obviously the upper deck is very different, but the steering rack is the same. The steering knuckles, right? These are the same. Caster blocks are the same. Those are all the same. And by the way, these steering knuckles are the same as you would have on the YZ10 with the exception of this extra piece out here. And the reason for this hole is to give you different Ackerman, I think more Ackerman than what you would have on the YZ10. So apparently the way this is set up is better for on-road racing, and then on the YZ10 you would use this inner hole here. Although I am curious about trying this outer hole on a YZ10. Maybe I'll do that one day, we'll see. Other differences, shocks, completely different. They went from these teeny tiny shocks to more standard bore shocks. The shock towers are also different, completely different towers compared to these. Okay, so this is the front tower on the YR4-M2, and then this is the front tower on the Type J. Not only are the towers different, you actually have options. You have 2 mounting hole options on the top of the tower for the shocks, and then for the inner front camber links, you have 3 holes. There's 2 holes there that you can see, and then there's 1 hole that the inner camber link is also mounted on. So you get 3 hole options there, and then for the rear, they kind of did something similar. You actually get 4 holes on the rear tower, 2 high, 2 low, whereas on the YR4-M2 it's just a single mounting point, and you get 3 camber gain mounting options here for your camber links. But just like with this car with the stock setting, the actual mounting position is kind of on the high side. So if I were a better hand driller, I would drill maybe another 1 or 2 holes down here if I can get them to be just the right spacing. Because if I take this one and drop it down, I can't actually do that because the inside of the tower ends right here. But I can take this outer hole here, this guy right here, and drop that down right to the, basically put this part to the top of this sort of ear here on the bulkhead. And maybe if you're precise enough, you might be able to cram 2 holes in here side to side, maybe. But really, you're probably better off doing like another hole down here and another hole down here. Or maybe if this shock tower can be a little wider on this side, give you a little more clearance to put 2 holes here. But if I were to run this, I would take this tower, or maybe get a copy of it, and drill at least 1 more hole down here to minimize the rear rolling. The rear hub carrier on this is also bespoke, because the rear carrier on this is a lot like the 94, the 95 YZ10, the Works YZ10s. But this one here has more material carved out. You see it's less bulky, right? That is specific to this model. So there's some custom bits, or let's say bespoke bits to the Type J. But otherwise, you know, fundamentally the same kind of car as the YR4-M2, for that matter the YR4. It just got a little bit more advanced over time with each generation, just like the YZ10s. So let me put that away. This, by the way, does not have slipper clutch. It's just a locked center pulley. Okay. Now, for what I'm going to run this year, maybe I should make a separate video for this, but I'll just cram it all into one video. This is the Kyosho TF5-S. So again, the rules for Silver Can are molded chassis with shaft drive. And there's all kinds of options you have for doing molded shaft drive chassis, including some modern things like whatever the Traxxas sedan is. I keep forgetting the name of it, but that seems to be a pretty popular option. There's also the Kyosho Phaser, which I'm building one for my son. That one's kind of cool, but it's a very simple chassis, more for sort of beginner level. I wanted something that was preferably a Kyosho, because I have a lot of Kyosho parts, and also has a lot of tunability while still meeting the fundamental rules of shaft drive and molded chassis. TF5-S is I think the only generation of TF series chassis that they made that has a shaft drive option. There's also a TF5 that is belt drive, just like the TF4, the TF3, etc. But the TF5-S, for some reason, they made it basically like they took a laser ZX5 and they put sedan arm, sedan suspension on it, and That's it. You're done. You're off to go. So laser gearbox, front and rear. Laser ball diffs, front and rear. The sway bars, same sway bars. The caster blocks and steering knuckles are maybe a little different from the ZX5, but nonetheless, these are tunable. These are, well, those are just steering knuckles, but there's a lot of tunability here. Same, tunability that you would have on the ZX5 with the bulkhead, because it literally is a ZX5 bulkhead. With the inner ball stud, there's 3 holes there, so you can go to any one of those 3 holes and move the ball stud up or down. Ball stud on the caster block as well. That is part of the kingpin, so you could put spacers there, move this up or down if you want. Plenty of shock mounting options, 3 on the top here, 2 on the bottom for the arm, same in the back, 3 up top, and I think it's just 1 down low. Still plenty. And then the rear hub carrier, it's your classical old school ZX5 rear hub carrier with 3 mounting hole options on the bottom there for the hinge pin, and then 2 holes on top for the ball stud. Move those in and out, up or down. Plenty of tuning if you want to get lost tuning the car. But what I like about this is, again, I got a lot of Kyosho parts. I have laser parts, so I won't be wanting for spares for this, for like the little things. The bigger stuff like the suspension arms, the box it came with a whole bunch of spares, so I'm not worried about that either. So I think this will be a fun little car to run, and it was built pretty nicely, so I don't think I really need to tear it down and rebuild it, which is also good. All I did was just go in and replace all the Phillips screws with hex screws. So I think the S in TF5-S was meant as like a sport designation, so it came with a lot of Phillips self-tapping screws. So I just replaced all those with conventional, M3 screws. No slipper clutch here, just like that car, no slipper clutch. But I don't think you'll need it if you have a silver can motor. I will need to do a little bit of work to figure out what the correct gearing is for silver can on this, because I couldn't really find good information on what the final drive ratio is with the stock spur gear here. So I got to do a little bit of homework there. But pretty cool car. I look forward to trying this out and comparing it to this, even though this will be race legal this year and that one won't. I still want to get track time for both and just see how they do. Like in open practice. Okay. Long video. I apologize for that. But I just wanted to give you guys some update on what's going on here. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching.